5 or 8 months.
Is that good?
So the car's coming back sometime on Friday.
I think it will,
I should be
but
okay.
just once.
Yeah.
So let's say we decide it's going to be
Alright,
at 6:30 or 7 o'clock in the evening. Whoever wants to come back at 7 p.m. can. If they want to stay, they can get a grab bag.
There you go.
If 5:30 is the wrap up of the conference.
Nope, not just. If anyone's just coming, maybe grab a seat from outside and maybe we could shuffle up. Aaron?
Yep, okay.
A little bit. Yeah, well, they're all. Thank you.
All right, guys. Well, maybe I should take advantage of this little lull.
Just a couple more people. Just
Or are we still waiting for some people?
yeah.
The house is packed. Okay, just a minute.
I know.
We're gonna need a bigger boat.
Yeah. So we're maxing out at about how many totally understand. Oh, hey. Okay. How you doing?
Come on in.
Come on in. Great.
Did,
Yes, there will be space.
did you guys sign the fire code waiver?
Chairs are. Okay, the door is locked.
Can everybody hear us on the Telegram channel? Oh, really? Okay. I think they can hear us. I think I can see on the monitor there. We still trying to squeeze some people in?
It's 24.
What's the Google read machine here?
Where can we express that?
Holy smokes.
Yeah, come on in. I think
It's fine.
you guys can stabilize the bowl. Yeah. That's so cool.
Anywhere.
Great. Okay, so there's space back here. You want to come around?
Yes, there's no stool.
Perfect.
You sure?
Yeah. No worries. Joining us.
Oh, yeah.
All right, kids. It's Tuesday night, 5 p.m. local time here in Bali. It's been a while since I've seen you folks. Lots of new faces. We've got a jam-packed room here, and we are going to have the next episode of The Filter, number 1, 2, 3. Thanks for coming tonight, guys. Here's what we're going to cover. A lot of new faces, a lot of people that I've never met yet, but it's been about 4 months that I've been away. So I'm really glad to be back. Nice to see you all. And a lot has happened over those 4 months. Have you guys been paying attention to Bitcoin for the last 4 months?
Yes, we have.
How many people are new to Bitcoin? Oh, we got some new people. And how many people have been paying attention to all the Bitcoin drama, the Bitcoin soap opera? Okay. And, well, to say the least, these 4 months that I've been away have been jam-packed, right? And I think it's a useful exercise to go back and kind of see what has happened. We're going to talk about Bitcoin tonight, but there's lots of other altcoins in the altcoin universe, and the problems that Bitcoin encounters will probably be encountered at some point by other coins. So past is prelude. Those who ignore history are doomed to repeat it. Pick your favorite saying. I think it's good to go back and look at history. So we're going to go back over the last 4 months. Since we haven't talked in 4 months, I'm going to give you my version, or I'm at least going to kind of count the guideposts. And then I'd like to see, maybe I'll say something that you think is wrong. And you guys can jump in and we can figure it out together. So that's the first part of the agenda. We're going to jump right into that. And then we're going to go over a little bit of local news that I think we can kind of segue right into. We've got some very interesting local news about Indonesia and merchants accepting Bitcoin as payment. And I know, Daniel, you posted something even in advance of this asking if governments have the power to control cryptocurrencies. And I think that's a worthwhile discussion. So we've got, hey, what's happening? Welcome back. Nice to see you. Okay, so we've got the next 90 minutes. I hope you guys took a bathroom break before you came in. Let's get things. Oh, and by the way, afterward we're going to Kismet. We've got a table reserved over there, and all the stuff that I can't mention that I did over the last 4 months, I'll tell you those stories when we have a drink at Kismet. All right, sound good?
Can we still pay through Bitcoin at Kismet?
But I think we'll have to test the waters. We'll have to test the waters tonight.
At your own risk.
We'll see who's feeling rebellious. All right, so I'm just going to share my screen here, guys, and help me keep an eye on the Telegram group. And because these are all the folks that are joining online and might be watching the Google Hangout. And I don't always pay attention to that side. So if we get any interesting comments, let me know, and we'll try to include the people that are at home. All right, so I like to take a look at what I call the Bitcoin time machine. And this is the price of Bitcoin over the last 4 months. So sometimes the price kind of coincides with historical events, things that are going on, and I might refer back to this chart. This is the price of Bitcoin. I think the last time I hosted a meeting here was June 20th, when the Bitcoin was $2,600, and we've recently been over $6,000. So apparently it's good for Bitcoin if I just disengage and stop paying attention. What are you leaving? I mean, correlation is causation, right? Okay, so a lot of the information that I'm going to talk about tonight is was kind of covered in an article on Forbes that was just published today. Will this battle for the soul of Bitcoin destroy it? And we do find ourselves at a crossroads with Bitcoin, and all the history that we're going to talk about kind of culminates in this question: what is going to happen on November 16th, which is the next key date that we're watching. But and she goes over a lot of history. So if any of the stuff that we talk about kind of intrigues you, but you have trouble following along, or you want to dive in, I hope you'll take a look at this article, and we'll post it in the show notes after the fact. Okay. So 4 months ago, we were in the midst of a 2-year debate about how to make Bitcoin scale. Bitcoin is this new form of money. It's gaining popularity. There's lots and lots of transactions, a growing number of transactions, and all of a sudden we bump up against this scaling issue. When Satoshi Nakamoto wrote the original white paper, he said Bitcoin is peer-to-peer digital cash, which kind of makes you think that it can be used to buy a pack of gum or a cup of coffee, is the use case that people often talk about. And it was quickly becoming evident that we weren't going to be able to buy small ticket items with Bitcoin because, well, you may or may not know that one of the ways that Bitcoin works is it pays the folks that run Bitcoin software, in part due to the fees that you attach to your transactions. And because there's so many people using Bitcoin, there became a marketplace for the fees. There was people contending to get their transaction into the next block. And so the fees were going up and going up and going up. And it actually kind of ruined our little experiment here in Ubud, because we got lots of restaurants that were accepting Bitcoin and lots of kind of merchants that were dipping their toe in the water and saying, yeah, I'll accept Bitcoin as payment. But the fees got to be $2, $4. I mean, there were some transactions that had an $80 fee. Yeah.
Or took 4 days.
Right. Well, the congestion on the network and the high fees really harmed the usability of Bitcoin. And because Bitcoin exists in a free market, it really opened up the doors for all of the other altcoins that I know people are so excited about. We're still in the midst of an ICO extravaganza. I mean, there's all kinds of things happening. And I think Bitcoin's stumble kind of opened the door for all these other things to happen. And that's a good thing. That's a great thing. But every other currency, every other coin, at least that's trying to tackle the money use case, is going to encounter this problem, right? The scalability problem. And a lot of people are watching how Bitcoin handles it. And I mean, whole coins are based on the fact that Bitcoin is failing in this area. And they're saying, well, we've got a better coin. We incorporate dividends, or we have a voting mechanism, or we've got more scalability. And this is all a good thing, right? We all want, well, I and many want a more fair form of money for the planet, right? And that's really what the Bitcoin promise was in the beginning. And we're going to get it. It remains to be seen if it's going to be Bitcoin or not, but we're going to get it, which is really, really exciting.
Can you define scalability? I'm sorry, I know rookie, but
Sure. Scalability means how many transactions can it do in a given period of time. Like Visa, MasterCard, they do 60, 70,000 transactions per second. You can imagine all the people swiping their credit card, all around Ubud, all around Indonesia, all around the world, paying for hotels, paying for gas. I mean, that's a lot of transactions. And people have this vision for cryptocurrency to do the same thing, but it has to scale. It has to handle that many transactions. And we got stuck around 7 transactions per second, actually less than that, 5 transactions per second. So there's no difference. I mean, there's a huge difference between Visa and Bitcoin, right? And that's what we fought about for 2 years plus. And we fought and fought and fought and fought and fought. If we look at the Bitcoin time machine, you can see what was happening during that time as far as the price goes. I'm just going to go back more in time. So, we started our little Bitcoin project here in Ubud around 2014, and you can see that it's just kind of bumping along, bumping along in the, $200, $300. And all the while, everyone's fighting, like, how is this going to scale? What's the scaling solution? We should have bigger blocks. No, we shouldn't. We should have segregated witness, and, let's have the Hong Kong agreement. And then the Hong Kong agreement falls apart. And then there's all this intrigue, right? And there's all this gamesmanship, brinksmanship, trolling, you name it. And things got pretty vitriolic. I mean, they got pretty down and dirty, nasty. I think some friendships were lost. They called it a Bitcoin civil war, right? And a lot of people got a little bit burned out. These are all, technology people are used to, kind of fighting, but then they can make a decision and then they can move on. And this new thing, Bitcoin, this consensus software that doesn't change unless everybody agrees, is a new thing, right? And there's billions of dollars at stake. So it got pretty heated, And these doldrums, in part, it was a recovery from this bubble that happened. There was some, this was a big bubble at the end of 2013, and a lot of people were bought here and were waiting for the price to come back. But really, all these last 2 years has been just people fighting, right? They call it the block size debate, because Bitcoin is a blockchain, and blocks is just data, and the data consists of transactions. And if the block is a certain size, you can only get so many transactions inside. And some people just said, well, make the blocks bigger. But that has unintended consequences. And there were people that really were worried that the blockchain, which is a history of all the transactions that have ever taken place on Bitcoin, would grow so quickly and so exponentially that it would centralize and it would be co-opted by governments, by banks, by other interests, because it would soon become too expensive for your everyday Joe to afford to run Bitcoin software. So that's the dichotomy. Everybody wants this new money, this new fair money, this money that's unfettered by banks and governments and regulators and uncensorable money. And they all had the same concerns, right? The what they call the big blockers wanted you still to be able to buy a cup of coffee. They wanted user adoption. They wanted to follow the usage growth trajectory that we were already on. And the small blockers wanted to make sure that everybody could run a node and that node software would not become so huge that people could no longer run it. Everyday people could no longer run it. So that's the trade-off, and that's what people were fighting about. And people, you can imagine over the course of the years, people have built whole companies, and the fate of their company rests on whether it goes one way or the other way. I mean, there's lots and lots of frothiness, people getting angry, people who have invested their lives into these businesses that are contingent upon the decision that happens. And so that brought us to this thing called the user accepted soft fork, UASF. How many people know what the UASF is? Okay, so I'm glad to see not a lot of hands going up, because this is a part of the history, and we probably wouldn't have any progress. We'd still probably be deadlocked if it wasn't for this user accepted soft fork. And this was a line in the sand that the core developers, or at least a contingent within the core developers, kind of forced the hands of the miners. So miners create blocks and provide all the hashing power, the security for the network, and the nodes run a certain version of Bitcoin software. And for years and years and years, that software was provided by the core developers, right? But fundamentally, there was a disagreement between the core developers, who were mostly quote unquote small blockers, and the miners, which wanted to just increase the block size. How am I characterizing this? Is everybody kind of
That's good.
yeah? So this was the crux of the Civil War. Yeah.
Can I ask something?
Sure.
So if the size of the blocks goes bigger, then I understood bigger miners will have the chance to take more transactions, and there will be less for smaller nodes, or not?
No, the nodes would get larger because every node has to have a copy of the blockchain.
Right.
And if each block is 8 megabytes instead of 1 megabyte, then it grows 8 times faster. And so your hard drive, you have to store the entire blockchain, and it's growing 8 times faster than it was before.
So you need to be a bigger fish to hold the same thing.
Right. So and really there were people that thought that it would grow so quickly that it would soon become very centralized, and it would no longer be something that everybody could participate
It's pretty
in.
much at the moment like a few big miners, and that's it, or not?
Yeah, well, this is miners. There are miners, and there are nodes, and there is a lot of centralization in the mining, and this is part of the problem that manifest in this debate was the fact that the miners had so much power, because they were blocking the software that the Bitcoin core developers wanted to run, right? The developers came up with this very elegant solution in the form of segregated witness, which we'll go over later, and said, here, we've got the solution. And the miners were saying, well, that will impact us negatively economically, so we're not gonna run that software, right? So, and this is the crux of this user activated soft fork. I call it something else before. User activated soft fork, where they basically drew a line in the sand and said, we're going to get a bunch of nodes to agree to not validate blocks from miners that don't follow this new technology solution. They said after a certain date, August 1st, 2016, 2017, August 1st, 2017, we're going to activate this soft fork, and we are no longer going to validate blocks that are given to us by miners that are running this other software. And question.
Could you zoom in on that date on that chart, please? Because that seems
Sure.
like your whole point of having that chart.
Yeah, let's zoom into August.
That's like 2 months ago.
What happened?
What did you do?
I think it's still okay. It's still okay. Yeah. So August 1st. Yeah, so right in here. So actually you can see that they're like leading up to the August 1st, there was a big run up. And then after August 1st, very interesting developments in terms of price.
Yeah.
And you can see there's almost an inflection point where it's like, people, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? I'm optimistic. I think something good's going to happen. Oh, maybe not, maybe not, maybe not. And then, well, then there's a big dip here, and we'll talk about what caused that. Yeah, something else caused that. Yeah, actually, it's good that you asked me to show this price, because after the user-activated soft fork, this is like a civil war. Like, I declare war on you guys, and there was all this Twitter storms, and yeah, you name it. It was like a soap opera. So then they had a big conference in New York City called Consensus. Do you guys remember this hitting the news? And they had something called the New York Agreement, or NYA. Barry Silbert, who's a big investor, got not everybody, but a big chunk of the players to sign a document that said, we're going to make a compromise. We're going to have SegWit first, and then we'll have bigger blocks in 90 days. Right? Let's compromise. And what's really funny about this whole thing is, when I first got involved with Bitcoin, they called it like the apolitical money. Like, there's no politics. It's just all code. You don't have to worry about people and greedy people like doing bankers, you know, like twisting their mustache. It's all tech. It's gonna be great. And yeah, and here we have a kind of a political thing happening where Barry Silbert is getting a bunch of people in a room. Supposedly it was a closed door meeting. That's what it was called on Twitter. You know, people, masters of the universe, thinking they can control things. But anyway, he got a bunch of key players to support this document, sign their names, and this is really what got the ball rolling, right? This is really what averted the user-activated soft fork, because the way that they set up the user-activated soft fork was if segregated witness was not activated by that date, it would kick in. So in the New York agreement, they said we're going to activate SegWit ourselves, but it's contingent upon raising the block size 90 days down the road.
Sorry, can you define what segregated witness is?
Segregated witness is a solution to the scaling debate that doesn't require a larger block. So they're segregating the witness data outside of the block so that they don't have to put it in there. And that makes the block smaller, which is de facto meaning you can have more transactions within the block. Okay.
Block data.
Yeah, the block data. So is that clear? Okay. All right. So this whole thing unfolded, and if you were paying attention, I mean, it's better than the Super Bowl. I mean, August 1st is coming. You know, if you had any money in the game, if you had any skin in the game, you're like, oh my God, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? And Twitter's just going crazy, you know, and lots of big personalities. I mean, it's entertaining. It's good spectator sport. But lo and behold, we had segregated witness activated, and a wild card happened. Does anybody know what the wild card was?
It's so much. I forgot. I know there's so much.
Bitcoin Cash.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Bitcoin Cash. What's Willie calling it? Willie coined a new term on Twitter for the initial fork offering, or IFO. Yeah.
Oh, that was funny.
So Bitcoin Cash was the initial fork offering, and so what is Bitcoin Cash? Does anybody know how that happened? What it was? What they did?
I think it was a group of miners from China that they decided to go with the way that they wanted to do it, that would be faster, and they just create a new version that they split the blockchain in two, and the part continues with how it was, and the new one just, I think, it doubled the amount of the capacity of the blocks. It just came with a new currency in parallel.
That's right. That's right. That's a great explanation. There was a lot of the mining takes place in China, and there's this character named Jihan Wu, and he kind of allied himself with an old-time Bitcoin guy named Roger Ver, and they were kind of in this big block camp. And a little subtext, a little kind of subplot to the story was segregated witness was going to break a little known secret that some of the Chinese miners had implemented that allowed them to make a lot more money, have a lot more hashing power at their disposal. And this segregated witness was going to break that. So this is actually why they broke the Hong Kong agreement. They made all kinds of excuses, but the real reason was that they had this secret way to give themselves more hashing power. And they were hemming and hawing and making excuses, but they were really making more money because they had this secret way to mine Bitcoin that they weren't sharing with the rest of the world. In fact, they put out of business KNC Miner. Does anyone remember? Big mining operation in the I don't know, Sweden or somewhere up there. And they were Iceland. Was it Iceland? And they were like, we can't be we don't know how these Chinese miners are profitable. We cannot, we've been in the data center business forever. We have super cheap electricity, no heating costs, and we can't compete, and we don't know why. And it turns out they had this secret. But as soon as segregated witness showed up, they wouldn't have this benefit any longer.
I was quite surprised at the very short timeline lead in to the Bitcoin Cash. I mean, it wasn't a very
it wasn't. It was
no one debated.
It was a total surprise. Wild card. Easter bunny out of a hat, out of the cake. Hey, surprise! And I think that's what I think that might coincide with the
dip.
Yeah. Oh, is this? No, this is still in July. Where's August 1st? Here's August 4th. Ah, okay.
It's a little dip before the.
So it might be this dip.
No, it was already announced.
Okay, gotcha. All right. So anyway, after this whole thing was resolved, we have this explosion in the price, which is all this pent-up demand, like all these people on the sidelines saying, we don't know what's going to happen. Is Bitcoin going to explode? Is there going to be no Bitcoin after August 1st? And August 1st happened. It was a bit like Y2K. How many people remember Y2K?
We're dating ourselves.
Like I was in the crash position. And,
you are not.
A lot of money was made.
And that's kind of what August 1st was. And August 1st came and went. Everyone's kind of looking at each other. Are we still alive? We still alive? All right, let's go buy some Bitcoin. So we had this huge spike. Where's my mouse? We had this huge spike in the price. The price went nuts. I mean, we had back in 2013 we spiked to $1,200 and then came back down to $200, and here we're up over 2,000. I mean, this is like astronomical. This is like to the moon, they say. I mean, when we saw this kind of this kind of slope on the graph, I mean, it looks like a bubble, and it looks like how could it go up to this fast, this much? And it's because we had 2 years of pent up demand and people not knowing what was happening. Okay, so let me just check my notes here. All right, so the user activated soft fork kind of worked, even though it never got implemented. The New York agreement was really made it happen because all these people, there was this momentum, there was this consensus, people were there ready to agree to move on, contingent upon these blocks being bigger. And we had this unexpected thing, Bitcoin Cash happened, which really was, it's interesting because you got the big block camp and the small block camp, and we were supposed to go to this New York agreement and the 2x is doubling the block size 90 days, but all of a sudden we've got Bitcoin with 8 megabyte blocks. No SegWit, no other scalability solutions there, just larger blocks, and they call it Bitcoin Cash. And the market can decide, hey, is that the scalability solution we want? Is that the new Bitcoin? Should we start calling this other thing Bitcoin? Or do we call the old Bitcoin Bitcoin? And how did we decide that? Anybody know, like, how did people decide what's what, or what is Bitcoin?
They sold Bitcoin Cash and bought Bitcoin.
Right, right. As soon as you have a market for both, the market can decide what's real. Like, let's get a vote, and you've got skin in the game, right? You've got money, real money on the line. What do you really think? Do you like this scalability solution or that scalability solution? If you like the big blocks, then you sell your Bitcoin and you buy the Bitcoin Cash. If you think that that's going to centralize and break Bitcoin eventually, then you sell one for the other. Did anybody in the room like go binary, like one side or the other? Yeah, all Bitcoin.
Bitcoin Cash.
Yeah, all Bitcoin Cash. Well, it's still alive and kicking. I know some very smart people that are did the same thing.
Who determined, was it that powerful group of miners that allotted equal amount of Bitcoin Cash for every Bitcoin that you have, you automatically receive?
Well, the way it worked is essentially it's kind of like, did you ever see that Star Trek episode? Like, I'm really dating myself, but you know how they can beam me up, Scotty, and they like beam up and down, and like there was this one episode where they were trying to beam Kirk back to the ship, but something went wrong, and then there were like two James Kirks, right? There's like the evil James Kirk and the good James Kirk, and they were both James Kirk up until that moment, and then after that moment, like one guy's evil and the other guy's good. That's kind of the way it worked with Bitcoin Cash. Bitcoin was Bitcoin up until a certain date, and then there was two that had a common history, but a new rule set going forward. So as soon as there was a block found on the original Bitcoin and another block found on the Bitcoin Cash, their histories diverged, and so that's why they didn't just say you get this much Bitcoin Cash. You automatically have the right to spend Bitcoin Cash if you have the keys from the old Bitcoin. So if you had access to your private keys from the old Bitcoin, you had the ability to spend Bitcoin itself and Bitcoin Cash. You could figure out which James T. Kirk you liked better.
Okay. So it was not an incentivized thing by any.
Well, not really per se, but it was interesting that people that it had a value after the fact. And, for a couple of weeks there, I was like, well, Bitcoin should be at a certain price, because I would add up the Bitcoin price and then add up Bitcoin Cash and say that's what the Bitcoin should be worth, right? Because there's that much money in the market. And I think, I have a theory, I'd be interested in other people's, but it's been coming down ever since. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of people who don't understand the split, don't know what to do. And maybe when they figure out what to do, they make a choice. But in any case, Bitcoin Cash has come down in value. It's still worth $340, $350, something like that.
Off a high of 1,000.
Yeah. Well, there were those first few days when it was really unclear, like the market was trying to figure out what the value was.
The futures were already trading high. Bitcoin Cash futures were already before the fall trading pretty high, like $400, $600.
Right.
It gives an indication what it might be worth.
Right.
Once it hits.
Right. Well, and that's one of the values of future markets is to kind of predict the future, right? But I think cryptocurrency futures markets are quite immature these days. Ivana probably knows more about that than I think she played around in those markets. But yes, good point. The futures markets predict that, and that will also be instructive because we've got another thing coming up, and we've got the same indicators. Okay, so segregated witness. We've got segregated witness now, and it's quite interesting to consider the implications, because segregated witness gives us the scalability solution, but it also gives us the ability to move transactions into another layer, and it also gives us the ability to do what's called atomic swaps, right? So other coins that have also implemented segregated witness can basically put coins from both coins in an escrow account, and then you can do Litecoin to Bitcoin, Bitcoin to Litecoin, for example, because they both have implemented segregated witness. So we're creating this ecosystem the technology foundation can support coins going from coin to coin. So if I like Litecoin, but you only want to receive Bitcoin, that's going to be possible. And it's because they're moving the scalability to another layer, another logical layer in the stack. It's kind of like the way the internet is set up, where you've got TCP, IP, right? Those are two layers in the stack, right? And they're separate because that allows you to change one and it doesn't affect the other as long as you don't change the interface between the two. So there's that. There's also this thing called Mimblewimble, which is going to provide fungibility or anonymity. Bitcoin is not anonymous, despite what many people and many in the mainstream media will say that it's anonymous or pseudonymous, but it really doesn't have true anonymity. And they've actually developed some really fantastic tools to determine whose Bitcoins are whose. So if you're trying to keep secret, you've got to be quite tech savvy these days. And fungibility or anonymity is one of the key things that makes money useful. This is one of the things that Aristotle said was very important for money. There was a characteristic of money. It should be fungible, meaning that if I owe you $1, I can pull any dollar out of my wallet and that's good enough. Like a dollar is a dollar is a dollar. I don't have to give you the same dollar that you loan to me. You loan me $1, I go find another dollar somewhere and I can pay you back with another dollar, not the same one. But if you have an immutable record of every Bitcoin transaction that has ever taken place, and you've got this ability to find out who spent those Bitcoins or where those Bitcoins came from, what can happen?
Some accounts may be blocked, for instance.
Yes, censorship. You can say, well, if those Bitcoins used to belong to somebody on the dark web or on Silk Road, we don't accept those. Or that Bitcoin used to belong to a terrorist, so you can't use that. And we create this nightmare where you have to check, the Russian blacklist, the American blacklist, the Brazilian blacklist, and you can spend this coin and not that coin, or we can shut somebody down. This Bitcoin used to belong to Julian Assange, so it's no good here. And this harms the utility of any money. And we find ourselves at a crossroads because most governments don't want anonymous money. I mean, they want to track your money and they want to digitize it. They're trying to get rid of cash. There's a quote unquote war on cash. Cash has that fungibility feature to it. And that's what makes it useful. You wouldn't want to pull a dollar out of your pocket and have to go figure out if it was on a blacklist somewhere, right?
Is it just Bitcoin that you can find out who it is? Are other altcoins possible to track?
Well, this is an identified shortcoming of Bitcoin, and there are whole coins that are dedicated to anonymity. I like to call it fungibility because fungibility is a known positive aspect of money itself, and anonymity just sends people into a tizzy. They have like a knee-jerk reaction. It's like one of those suitcase words where, what are you trying to do? Why don't you, what kind of crazy stuff are you up to? You don't want people to know.
So you're saying there's a way to actually make Bitcoin become anonymous, or Bitcoin is just as it is trustable, and then if you want anonymity, you just go for another coin that took that, like Komodo or Dash?
Well, if you knew the answer to that question, then you and I could start a hedge fund and we could make a ton of money. It's an open question. It remains to be seen. There are anonymity-specific coins, fungibility coins. Coins like Monero, and Dash has a dark send, and Zcash. And those are kind of, well, I would say, if you bring up, sorry, I'm American, there's a lot of American references, but if you go to Thanksgiving and your grandmother says, well, I don't like Dash, it sounds like it's for criminals, or Monero. It gets kind of a bad rap. People don't appreciate the nuances of the importance of that feature. But with segregated witness, supposedly we are going to get this fungibility that we need. The Bitcoin Cash wants to be cash, but it's going to have to solve that problem somehow. And it's unclear how they'll do it. Okay, moving on. Any questions on so far? All right.
Gary, I'm the Zcoin team on marketing.
Oh, you are?
And, yeah.
Ah, cool.
And basically what we do is we implement a layer of zero knowledge proof on top of the Bitcoin core code. So the reason we do that is because if one day we develop this mechanism to erase all the transaction history of this coin, if Bitcoin wants it, they can take our code and just like implement on top of Bitcoin. But we don't see that happening. There's so many politics going on. So there are projects like, which is their objective is to support the Bitcoin ecosystem.
Yeah, excellent. I mean, there's so much innovation going on. I mean, there's a lot of talk on Bloomberg about fintech, how hot the fintech sector is. But I mean, I'm a bit of a, Bitcoin. I see things through a Bitcoin lens, but I think that this whole innovation explosion is due to Bitcoin's challenging the status quo and showing up and doing things. And, Zcash is showing up, Monero is showing up. There's this whole ecosystem of altcoins. They're doing fantastic things. All the smartest people in tech are doing that. And I mean, it's like the Cambrian explosion with life, when there was no life for millions and millions of years, and then all of a sudden, like, there's turtles, it's like that, right?
Star Trek, explosion.
Yeah.
It's the Cambrian explosion for banking. We were in the Stone Ages until last year sometime. All right. Okay. So, past is prelude, right? We find ourselves in the midst of another crossroads because we've got this old promise that we made. What was that promise? You guys remember?
90 days something. Right.
90 days. We double the block size, right? That's the 2x. So when they say SegWit 2x, SegWit, hey, we did the SegWit. Okay, now we're ready for our 2x. Where's our 2x? And a lot of people are like, oh, well, I'm gonna have to get back to you on that. Maybe things have changed a little bit. Yeah, it's a weird situation because the agreement, the New York agreement, is the thing that allowed the compromise to happen. SegWit would have never arrived if we didn't have that compromise. And yet now it's time to deliver the 2x. And it's complicated because of Bitcoin Cash. Because Bitcoin Cash is the big block answer to that quandary, right? We didn't know we were going to have Bitcoin Cash when we agreed to the 2x. And now, if you're a big blocker, why not go with Bitcoin Cash? Why do we need to change Bitcoin and tack on this very controversial block increase unnecessarily now that there's the other option is available? So, I mean, I like to keep my word. A promise is a promise. I don't like to promise anything because I think I have a policy of not promising very often because of this very thing. Like, things might change. Like, there might be new circumstances, Obama said, you're going to be able to choose your own doctor. And then, after they talk to some people, I can't really do that. Or I'm going to close Guantanamo Bay. And then, oh, sorry, can't do that. Promises are, they're tricky because things change between the time that you promise something and then it's time to deliver.
Who are the people ultimately holding them accountable, though? So obviously in the Obama case, but in the Bitcoin case?
Well, people are asking, there's still people that want to see this 2x happen. There's people that have been developing it. It's a technology solution and it's supposed to kick in. And, a lot of people that originally signed have said, sorry, I know I signed this agreement, but given these new circumstances, we're not going to back it. There's this whole controversy around replay protection. Have you guys heard about replay protection?
Is that like a reboot, a reset?
Well, it's like a reset of sending your money. It's a dangerous thing. What it is if you have an IFO, an initial fork offering, if you got a common history, think about it. If you spend on one chain, who's to stop somebody from copying that transaction and say, oh, we're going to replay that transaction on the other chain, and then you lose that money, right? Or in the case of SegWit 2x, if you try to dump your coins, like let's say you don't like this 2x solution, and you say, I'm going to sell my 2x coins, somebody can turn around and execute that transaction on the original chain, and then you have neither. You don't have your 2x and you don't have your Bitcoin. And they are specifically, as far as I understand it, they're specifically not implementing replay protection as a kind of a brinksmanship, like you better do what we want to do here, because if you don't, we're going to have this existential risk in the replay attack. So those are the dynamics now. And on November 16th, on or about November 16th, we are going to have an answer to the question, right? I think what it seems like is going to happen is we are going to have a split. And we have futures markets for both coins, and I think it's like 0.1, 0.15 for SEG2X. And we've got precedent, right? We've seen this happen with Bitcoin Cash. So I don't know. I mean, people are really wringing their hands. You know, Laura Shin of Forbes wrote this article that says, you know, will this battle for the soul of Bitcoin destroy it? I don't think so. I'd really be interested if others have another opinion.
From a price perspective, would that equalize it or get more of a parity between the two, the BCH and Bitcoin?
Well, there's BCH, that's Bitcoin Cash. There's Bitcoin, BTC, and now there's, is it BCG? Oh, no, not Bitcoin Gold. That's
something else. Sorry.
So what's the new
B2X.
one?
I think it's
talking about B2X.
B2X is the symbol. Yeah.
B2X.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, it seems like. Go ahead.
Just for the replay protection, I think there is another important or a point they're making. The miners are not developing the software to implement the replay protection. They leave it up to the wallets developer, and I think that's also a responsibility issue, and that can be to an advantage of the consumer as well, you know, because my wallet's replay protection software could be way better and more specific to my wallet than the miner's software could be. So I think that's one reason also why they don't even go there.
So they're leaving it up to others
to
to
the exchanges
implement.
and to the wallet developers, you know, and apparently that's easy enough to write a code and, you know.
One less thing to do, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, at this stage, as far as I can tell, and like I said, I'd be interested in other people's opinions, but it looks like there's going to be another fork, and we're going to have B2X or whatever they choose to call it, and we're going to have the original Bitcoin. And it remains to be seen. I mean, the market is kind of telling us that we're going to have BTC be the, you know, the brand, and that's really what's up for grabs, is the brand of Bitcoin. It's got a pretty good reputation. And it looks to me like it's going to follow the same trajectory as Bitcoin Cash. You know, it might have some value, and it might, you know, play a role for how long, I don't know.
That's why the price is going up.
Right.
Yeah.
There's some very smart people that really believe in the 2X, and you know, even though it looks like it's got a minority, it's in the minority in terms of opinion. You know, these things don't go to zero. I mean, Ethereum was the first to do this. They had Ethereum and then Ethereum Classic, and those two still exist. So I mean, it hasn't been forever. It's been a few years though, and those things still trade and have value. And
Can I ask you one question?
Sure.
Do you think that this thing of having the main and the first coin splitting is good for the crypto world and for the main adoption in general terms of or the eventual replacement of the crypto for fiat money, or is bad for it?
I think it's bad in the short term, because we're entering this period where your grandmother is asking you about Bitcoin, right? And
Yes.
and she doesn't know what Bitcoin Cash is or what replay protection is, or I mean, all of that is just going to scare people away and harm the adoption rate. But I think I don't think these things can change too quickly, and that's one of the great things about Bitcoin is it's hard to change.
Because Bitcoin have this losing market cap at the same time that there is 1,000 new coins every day.
Yes. There's only so much money. I mean, there's a lot of money flowing into this space, but there's only so much money, and a lot of people are taking a look at other alternatives, and I think that's a good thing. I mean, all of this experimentation, like these things that Zcash is doing. I mean, there's money for the Zcash experiment, and it's going to play out, and something's going to happen, and maybe Zcash will supplant Bitcoin someday based on its merits, and that would be a good thing because we've got this. Some people call it the wild, wild west, but it's really this. It's more like the Galapagos Islands, where the fittest is going to survive, and we don't know if needs a long beak or a short beak yet. Sorry, weird mixed analogies there.
So Bitcoin's not going to have SegWit, and this Bitcoin 2x is going to have SegWit?
No. SegWit 2x is going to have SegWit, and it's going to have larger blocks.
Oh,
that's
Bitcoin 2x is.
Yeah.
Okay, and then Bitcoin's going to have.
Bitcoin already, as of August 1st, it has
SegWit.
the SegWit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just that the 2x just means that the block size.
Yeah.
So is it important that grandma starts using Bitcoin? Is that important for the Bitcoin movement to be more mainstream?
Yeah. If grandma's in Venezuela.
So what I'm thinking is, I had this idea last week, was that when is the Bitcoin school coming? Baby language of how you learn Bitcoin, like how you deal with Bitcoin. Because this is my second meeting, and it feels like a PhD of learning Bitcoin. So when is it going to go from PhD to baby language? Because that can help the adaptation for the mainstream.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's the work that needs to be done.
Yeah.
A lot of people compare Bitcoin to the internet, and there's these famous clips of the Today Show, and they're like, what is the email? We're still in that phase where your grandmother, it's not, she's not capable. I mean, she just doesn't have the time in her day to spend learning all this stuff. Even if she wanted to, it's just too specific, too niche, and too complicated. And that's just where we are.
Actually, I'm also working for a cryptocurrency mining company in the marketing department, and this is actually what we are trying to do. We detected that, for example, when you search for Bitcoin Academy on Google, you have all these websites that actually do a pretty bad job, I would say, because so from the marketing perspective, the more we use this kind of sometimes these words, let's face it, cryptocurrency is already quite hard to understand, and then even for, let's say, a normal or mainstream market, because who's going to use cryptocurrencies at the end of the day, right? So for example, right now, it is really, as we probably all know, it's really expensive to send money, for example, let's say to the US from here. So this is actually the usage or the benefit that the mainstream markets can benefit from that. And this is how we need to market it or sell it. And in the team, we're actually doing some research for consumer research about how the people do that and what do they think about it. And at the end of the day, trying to detect how in the 90s, the companies try to solve the internet. For example, I think American Online, AOL, how do they were selling in the internet? Because as you say in the Today Show, there is this video about what is the internet. And I think PayPal launched this campaign last year, move all money, there is new money in town. And there is a replay video to that video that is, hey, wait a second, that's actually Bitcoin, the new money.
Yeah.
And they start the introduction with this Today Show video. Okay. So this is a big task, and hopefully we will try to, we're working on a website already, to try to
You should do
collect.
a collaboration with Disney.
Why?
And make these
Cinderella coin.
What about you're walking over the blocks and you see what Bitcoin Cash is different, and you fall down on Bitcoin Cash?
I think we need to make it more, more sexy, maybe.
Because
exactly. At the end of the day, they don't need to understand how is Bitcoin working. It's just about, because my mother, for example, she drives a car. She has no idea about how it's working, but she needs to know that she goes from A to B. And that's exactly what we need to, at least in the mainstream market.
Yeah, I think for me the big problem here is fragmentation. It's like everybody's trying to go their own solution, and it's like this is super decentralized, super cool, super community, but I'm gonna do my fucking own coin. Wait a minute, what are we trying to keep here? And I think that the best solution we can do is just have, for instance, a universal wallet. You know, that's it. So with that universal wallet, just do whatever, you know. You have Zcash, I said that's Zcash. You got the burger coin, you know, doesn't matter. Who put coin? Beautiful. Just pay with, you know. But every time that there's a new coin, it's in that universal wallet. And then you can choose whatever flavor you want on that wallet. But everybody's trying to do their own thing separately. And I think that is making things harder for everybody.
Personally, I prefer that. I really do. I think that there's a benefit to having a decentralization and a degree of fragmentation. I mean, that's the movement that started, and I feel that maybe, you know, there's a point to get to where certain aspects of it become centralized, and it's worthy of having.
But it's not about centralized. You can still have decentralization with a single tool that is maintained by everybody. You don't need to compete. That's the thing, you know. When you come with the old mindset of competition, that's wrong. You know, you miss the boat.
It's like survive though. Like a lot of these coins are just going to like fizzle out over time, and just like the best ones will survive.
But then for the 90% that are not going to survive, they are just losing time, money, efforts, and everything. You know,
it's true.
Well, but you know, for the sake of security, though, for the sake of security. Oh, sorry. For the sake of security, all of this or most of this software is open source, right? Because you don't really want to run closed source software in this space, because what is my wallet doing on my behalf? You know, it needs to be open source. But what that allows people to do is, well, it becomes this co-opetition, or, you know, this environment where you can take a little from here and take a little from there, and you can inadvertently cooperate because there's really no other way to do it. I mean, people try to have closed source aspects to their software, but it also requires a lot of standardization. And there are wallets that are doing something similar. I don't know if you're aware of the Jax wallet or Exodus, where they can hold all of those assets and even use Shapeshift to train.
They still have holding like not even 10 coins.
Oh, what's that? I'm sorry?
I mean, all those wallets that you mentioned.
Yeah, they can't hold everything.
Coins, you
But
know?
they can't hold 1,000. I mean, it's like technical.
Yeah.
No, not 1,000. Just the one that you want to use. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if you're using 10, that's cool. But if you want to use 10 more and they're not available, just you know, maybe just go to buy water, and then you need the water coin. For that matter.
Well, actually, this is a good way to vet projects. If a coin shows up in a wallet, then you know, like at least the development team has taken a hard look and gone through the trouble of implementing that coin in their wallet. And I always
swaps immediately, you know.
Yeah.
So if you just came for one day here, you just buy the Hubert coin for one day. You change from another coin the money that you need to pay for one, and then you just delete it because maybe you go out of Bali and you don't need to have in your wallet that coin anymore. You know?
Right. Well, are you aware that Ethereum has a coin standard, ERC20?
Right.
And because there's that standard, I think it becomes much easier for wallets to implement coins that implement that standard.
Because they work with their network. But I don't know, for some reason, Ethereum sounds quite shady. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't really like it. It doesn't feel good to me. Yeah. I don't know.
Trust your instincts.
Yeah.
All right. Great stuff. Another point?
Oh, I just had a question. I'm sorry. I'm one of the new people to this, but okay. So are we talking about 4 different types of Bitcoin then? We've got Bitcoin, the 2X, and then the Bitcoin Cash, but then isn't there something called Bitcoin Gold?
Yeah. Only one Bitcoin.
My plant. I was wondering when you were gonna bring up Bitcoin Gold. Right on cue. Checks in the mail.
Hey, that's exactly why.
So Bitcoin Gold. I think this is what prompted Willie to coin the term initial fork offering, because anybody can take the Bitcoin software and say we're going to use the old Bitcoin chain and we can call it, I don't know, Bitcoin Gold, for example. And that's what they've done here. And I think we can expect to see more of this kind of thing. And yeah, I mean, when someone who's new to the space says, okay, so you're telling me there's Bitcoin, there's Bitcoin 2x, there's, how do I keep all these things straight? This is the problem. This is the marketing problem. And this is why it's bad in the short term, because it creates confusion. And
it's difficult to adopt, because if you have a shop and you're accepting Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is not anymore working because it's too expensive. So
right, and then somebody shows up and says, "Well, you can't spend it because they didn't do replay protection." You're like, "What is replay protection?" Like, forget about it.
Can I ask a question? Sure. So I'm very new as well. So when someone went and made Bitcoin Gold, so they essentially kind of copy the blockchain and create a new system, or even when Bitcoin Cash was created, does how is there a value created to Bitcoin Cash when they're just going and copying the blockchain? If I'm following the right process at all, why was it worth not anything? Why wasn't it worth $0 when they created Bitcoin Cash?
That is a fantastic question. I'm glad you asked that question. Well, and the shorter answer is because somebody's willing to pay that money for it on a market somewhere. But that's kind of a circular answer. The main thing I think that gives cryptocurrencies value is security, right? How much hashing power is behind that coin, and how unassailable is it because it's got that hashing power behind it. When I say hashing power, I mean there's, Bitcoin Cash has a ton of hashing power behind it, and it would still be very difficult for someone to compromise that network. So consequently, the market assesses that and says, well, that's worth something. Maybe it's not worth what Bitcoin is worth, but it's worth something. And when it goes below $300, I'm going to buy it. But the weird thing about valuations is, Bitcoin has a market cap of what, $70 billion, something like that. Does anybody know the latest? Over 100. But you couldn't sell all the Bitcoins and get that in your pocket, because when you start to sell, then the price goes down and you don't. So it's a weird, like, market cap is a weird number because it's not really, you can't just sell it all and get that. You personally can sell your little piece and get that, which is valuable, but it's Bitcoin Cash, I don't know what the market cap is, but it's not worth all of that. And in the case of,
that's the case with everything. Any asset in the world,
true. But it's a nuance that a lot of people don't understand. And with Bitcoin Cash, a lot of people are like, well, I'm just going to hang on to it and see what happens. I don't want to deal with the technology hassle of selling it. And so there could be an artificially low volume because people might want to sell it, but they don't want to go through the hassle, or maybe they think they're risking their Bitcoin to sell it. And so there could be an inflated value of Bitcoin Cash just because people aren't bothering to go through the trouble of selling it. That's possible. I don't know if that's what's actually happening. But you asked the right question. Like, all of us should be like, why is that worth that? This is ICOs are showing up and going, we're going to put like pets on the blockchain.
Yeah.
And you should be like, well, why would you want to do that? Like, who's going to buy that? What's that for? People aren't doing that. It's
marketing.
Yeah, dentist on the blockchain. Like, what problem is it solving? And everybody is kind of tacking blockchain onto their project and trying to get money and get interest. And blockchain is a really slow, really expensive database, right? It's not good for everything. And money is really the only use case where it has proven its utility. And we don't know if it can do smart contracts and identity and all these other things that they want blockchains to do. It's promising, but it's not proven.
There's other examples, though, right? Chrysler issued bonds or something like that with the blockchain. There's a few things that I think it's moving along.
Well, I was kind of disparaging blockchains a minute ago, saying it's a really slow, really expensive database. But the other way to look at it is it's the first real digital thing. Like, it's in the digital world, but it's real. Like, if I give it to you, I no longer have it. And for our whole digital lives, like, we get one CD and we copy it and give the songs to all of our friends, right? one copy is 10 copies, and your picture from your college dorm room gets up on the internet and never leaves. Like, you know what I mean?
But it's not, because you can copy the whole blockchain.
Well, you can copy the whole blockchain, but the blockchain keeps track of who owns it. So even though everybody can copy the blockchain, I can't have a Bitcoin at the same time that you have that same Bitcoin. And so it's a new animal on planet Earth. It's a real digital thing, and that's pretty special. And I think there will be some other things besides money.
Domain names is the first.
Domain names. Oh, as being a real digital thing. That's a good point. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. That's a good point. Well, and this is one of the things that they want to. Well, with domain names, you need a domain registrar, and you need these centralized things. And there's people talking about using blockchain to replace the domain name system. So, but that's a good point.
Because by the moment it's issued by the ICCA.
I can.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's decentralized, and that's terrible. That you can, you cannot even own your own digital identity. You just need to. You can rent it for 1 year, for 40, for 60, but you never own it. It's.
Yeah, we could do better, right?
That's what internet means to be.
I agree. All right, guys, we've got about a half an hour left, and I'd like to move on to the next topic, if that's okay. Does anybody have any other? So that's the history, the last 4 months. That's everything I missed. I was in the jungle, and I missed it all, and I read it all this morning, and I told you about it.
Is the snapshot for Bitcoin Gold back in July, or is it?
It'll be the whole thing. I don't know. I think it's going live like today or soon.
Yeah.
The fork just happened. Yeah.
I don't know if it's relevant, but if you scroll down the comments on the right, Roberto made a comment about
Bitcoin Gold.
Bitcoin Gold.
Yeah, he knows a lot about it. I think he did some consulting or was, yeah. All right.
It's a little bit higher up, I think.
What, Roberto, can you hear us?
Yeah, go up a little bit.
Okay.
Bitcoin Gold started as a
There you go.
BTC GPU to bring mining to the masses.
Okay. Yeah, they're changing the algorithm. Where's the
Bitcoin Gold has a noble aim.
Here's Bitcoin Gold is using this a new proof of work algorithm called Equihash. Equihash.
Yeah.
Equisquash.
The team seems dodgy.
The team seems Roberto, yes.
Who said that? Yeah, the aim is noble. They all want
Oh yeah, yeah. So right now there's centralization in Bitcoin mining, and they want to make it so that Bitcoin Gold mining pools are not possible. And I think that's tied to the proof of work algorithm, this Equihash change.
Meanwhile, Will is going to make Bitcoin platinum.
That's not really word. That's another.
7-minute abs. What about 6-minute abs?
Okay.
I got 6-minute abs. It's way better.
6-minute abs.
Yeah, I mean I got 5-minute abs.
Man.
It's way better than 6-minute abs. All right, guys, moving right along. We've got a half an hour, and this is a little closer to home. And we just got the news. This was written by our own Stephen DeMillionaire. Indonesia halts Bitcoin payments for businesses. The Bank of Indonesia has just announced that Bitcoin is not an officially recognized medium of payment in Indonesia, pouring water on a fintech sector that was just getting fired up. Yeah, so anybody who's hung out in Ubud for the last 3 years knows that we are trying to create a little Bitcoin economy, or at least we were, where you can, live your life on Bitcoin. You can find a scooter, go out to eat, watch a movie. Like, we've been working on this, and
rent a house.
Yeah.
Sell a house. Go to a hotel.
It looks like, well, there's no new law here. So this is interesting. This is from the Bank of Indonesia, which is a central bank, a private bank, but they've been given the mandate by the government of Indonesia to regulate the banking industry. So they do have the ability to enforce regulations, and but no new laws were passed. I want to stress that they're simply reinterpreting laws that already existed, and I believe the name of the law is mentioned in this story. But essentially, what it says is you need to denominate all of your prices in rupiah. So no more putting a billboard up. This villa is $250,000, right? You have to price your villa in rupiah.
Well,
So that's the price tag.
That's been for a
And then the
while.
transaction needs to take place in rupiah. Like you can't give me a villa and I give you $250,000. I've got to turn my $250,000 into rupiah. I give you that, and then you give me the villa. And this is to, well, does anybody know why a central government would want to do that?
Because they want to protect their own currency.
Right. Demand for currency gives it its value. And if you sidestep the currency, then there's less demand. And so the value goes down.
Then they should create a denomination more than 100,000.
You weren't here when it was just 10,000. You literally had suitcases.
Yeah, they're trying to drive economic activity. Presumably that's taxable economic activity through the rupiah. Yeah, and if you go walking through the airport, they're telling the tourists, like, it is illegal to spend dollars in this country. You've got to use rupiah.
Yeah, but the reality is completely different.
Totally.
There are a lot of businesses, hotels, exporters, all that. It's complete
I
nonsense.
remember when they put that rule in a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah.
Well-
It's been like that for years.
But
Well,
they
They don't even follow their own rules.
US still learn now.
Well, it's
It wasn't even that much.
Yeah, maybe 18 months ago.
That's
But
right.
it's the same rule. Well, and when you think about it, though, I mean, when we were thinking about this, we were thinking about the precedent that is set by Visa MasterCard, right? Because you walk into a shop and the price of that dress is in rupiah, but when you swipe your card, you know, the merchant gets paid in rupiah, but when you go home and pay your Visa MasterCard bill, you're paying in euros, paying in dollars, paying in your home currency.
And quite often you even get the option on it, right? On the newer machines, you get do you want to pay in rupiah or it's another scam, basically. You know, to kind of take
Right,
more
to
money.
try and take their little piece of the pie. And so that was the justification. And then now we've got kind of a statement from a person at the Bank of Indonesia that's saying, yeah, the governor. That's his title, the governor. Is that like the head guy? Okay. Sorry, I should have known that. So he's saying that, in fact, Bitcoin payments are not legal, and we will exercise our right to enforce that regulation. And
So I have this question: if the grassroots, because this you mentioned something beautiful. You said fair money.
Mhm.
So if Bitcoins is fair money around the world, that could be the mission. If more people, like maybe billions of people, are involved, they are not dealing with big Bitcoins, but it's spread. So people are getting to know it and using it. Will that make it harder for the government to get in the way?
Yes.
Can't get in the way.
yes,
This is a
Well,
direct
they
threat
can
to
and they can't, though.
I mean, look, their currency is one of their arms of power control over any country does the same thing. Bitcoin's an asset here, yeah? They did that so they can tax it. So it doesn't mean you still can't trade and go, you're basically buying and selling Bitcoin, yeah? I mean, you're not doing a technical exchange of money buying, there's all this gray area. The reality is, don't listen to, I mean, he probably doesn't even know what cryptocurrency is. I can guarantee it. I was just at a fintech event in Jakarta, and they said it's, all the breakthrough stuff. There wasn't one mention of Bitcoin or blockchain during the whole 2-day event. They're not interested in it. They're just trying to ignore it because the power comes when more people use it. Basically, it makes fiat currency less.
You have governments now gearing up, and you can be sure that all of the big governments are going to launch cryptocurrencies.
Yeah.
And that's what occupies my mind. What is going to happen when the other side of the trade, the one that owns the payment system, the merchants, the entire physical network that is in place that is using that we're using today, once these guys launch a cryptocurrency, how does Bitcoin compete against that?
Yeah. Well, why would they not ban
They already
Bitcoin at that
have.
point?
They already have,
Their whole back end is already done.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, does it really cost $75, $50 or whatever it is to transfer money? No.
No, it doesn't.
They're already using it.
But there comes in the question of competition and of usability and the grandmother. Is she going to use Bitcoin or is she going to use China coin or Swiss coin?
The key there is the scarcity, that you know that Bitcoin will have a fixed supply and you never know how much money they can print, because they.
But unfortunately, people don't.
Say, oh, we got a bill to pay.
People don't assess that though. They don't make that assessment. Most people don't.
Yeah.
Most people aren't shopping for money. In fact, even the idea of shopping for money is like blows people's minds up.
So basically, these two meetings are talking so much, and most people out there don't know that I didn't know. And
Can you speak up a little? Sorry.
okay, these Bitcoin meetings have been the first Bitcoin meetings and the first introduction to Bitcoin in my life. I have friends who have Bitcoins, who talk about Bitcoins, but never understand it. Now I finally start to get a little bit of it. And what I'm trying to say is that I have the intuition from those two meetings we had that there is going to be a fight with a big guy, like you talked about Barry Silver, like the Wall Street guys. They're gonna want to take this when it gets too powerful. And what I'm trying to say is that if we spread it all over the place, it's gonna be harder for them to do it. And that's why this theme in my head is we have to educate the public in a simple language, because then we can make it so powerful they can't do anything. Because it feels like this is a precious thing for humanity. It's not just money. That's the concept I have with those two meetings we have.
I agree.
There's a way around all this as well. If you think of like how OMG works, it'll pay out in the local currency and it'll transfer whatever into whatever. So you can theoretically use other blockchains and blockchains in blockchains to get around any of these problems. So
Oh my God.
The solution's already there.
Okay, good.
OMG.
I'm glad somebody got it, JP.
Look at the comments of
There's a-
Willy Woo and Will. Yeah. So
There's a-
Oh,
no,
that's another will. Okay.
Oh, he's here. Great. Cool.
So there's a conference. There's a conference happening on Friday down in southern Bali. That'll be kind of a microcosm of what you're talking about, because it's called Block Bali, and there's
a conference.
Conference, and there's representatives from Bank of Indonesia going to be there. Representatives from the banking, the governing body that's supposed to be above the Bank of Indonesia going to be there.
Yeah.
And the police are going to be there.
Police are gonna be there.
Seriously.
Interesting.
And the rapping professor will also be
And
there.
the rapping professor.
Hey, time to grow here.
Well, I think this is a.
Yeah, they haven't understood it yet. So when they understand it, that's when it's like a movie. That's like the bad guys come and say, "Oh my God, I want to listen to this." I understand.
I suspect they don't want to understand it.
Yeah.
We had
No, they don't need to.
We had a. Just getting back to the question at hand here. We had a question posed by Daniel. Based on this article that he posted in the Facebook group, which asserts that government is going to show up someday and they're going to take over and there's not going to be anything anybody can do about it. Bitcoin's going to go to zero because as soon as this hits the radar, as soon as it gets large enough, they're just going to co-opt it.
Yeah.
Or he's saying in terms of the bubble, that's the headline that gets the click, and then he goes on to say that Bitcoin is going to go to zero because governments are going to get involved. And so the question on the group was, can governments do this? Do they have the power to shut down Bitcoin whenever they like? Or can they force the majority of the populace into their own money or their own co-opted version of this trend, so that grandma never really knows about Bitcoin, starts using something else, not understanding the principles that started the movement in the first place? That's an open question. It's true, Olivier, that they can't technically stop it, but it's bad news if the United States said Bitcoin's illegal tomorrow. it would be make it a tough slog.
Yes, I'm not saying it would, but I don't think it would. I don't think it would eventually. It's going to run its course.
Like China does every.
Yeah.
There is
China-
another sort of like reality check aspect to this obviously opposing thing, and that is that those guys who are actually running the government, this is the huge corporations, and those guys, the billionaires, they already have so many bitcoins,
Yes.
and they're dictating more or less the government what to do. So it would be not in no one's interest to shut off Bitcoin, especially not for those guys who run the show.
But also,
That is actually more or less the reality at this point. It's just not really out.
So that means that if we're quick and get it out and spread to the masses,
Well,
the
it
masses
just
can be
takes
more
its own run, you know. It's decentralized. You can do whatever you want to do with it. But the big boys are in it, and I guess they're not gonna deregulate it. All they want is the taxes from it, so they control the up and off ramps into cash.
Yep.
But Bitcoin or any other of those currencies, they'll be as free as they're intended to be, even though most of it is held by the super
Okay,
rich.
they benefit from it.
Yeah, but sure, but everyone who's getting early benefits, you know, so they benefit more. So
Perhaps greed will save us.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, exactly.
Although it is a large lever of control that governments have that they will be giving away when they cede control to a cryptocurrency that's where they no longer have control over the supply. It will level the playing field.
I don't see it that way. I don't think they have the power to give it away. Just the power shifts, you know. They don't have a choice. The power gets, it's like a balloon that deflates. That's
Wouldn't
it.
a well-timed scare from these powers allow Bitcoin to dip to a level where they buy in and savvy investors buy in as well?
That's happening
Happened a
already.
few weeks
Well,
ago
yeah.
with China, and
There's
it
a
dropped
big
down to
crash
2,800. We're talking about 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Yeah.
When it was at 2,800 because of the China news, and here we are at 6,000. So the resiliency seems to kind of, at least to this point, supersede the idea that governments and people who own large amounts of Bitcoin can make a difference even when they get together and collude.
Yeah, while the whole crypto market of $180 billion, this is minuscule. This is a drop in the ocean financially of what's A, going to come, and B, what's already existing in the other financial world. You know, I don't know how many trillions the stock market is worth on its own, you know. And then you take the debt market, the bonds. That Bitcoin is not even a fraction of a percent of what actually it can be.
But also, governments don't represent.
And then those manipulations won't happen anymore, because then you need $1 trillion to manipulate it. You know, it can't be done. Just now, where the market is so small, you can be a whale with a few billions. This will disappear in a year's time, 2 years' time. This is gone.
Eventually, people will get the shits where they already are with government. So, you know.
It's a long game. It's a long game,
yeah.
and we can get caught up in the details, and things can look very dire in the short term, but the arc of progress seems to be pretty positive.
Well, my conclusion would be it's already past the point of anyone can control it. You know, it's decentralized and so well established that how fast it will grow is just a matter of, you know, how many people adapt it, like you were saying. But I don't think it can happen.
I hope you're right. I hope you're right.
That.
What steps could governments take to try and control it?
Well, the Bank of Indonesia just said you can't use it to buy anything in Indonesia.
Yeah, but you know, this is a political game. Russia did the same thing. Putin sent the minister out of, and he talked out Bitcoin will never happen, and then Putin steps in and says the polar opposite. So it's just,
Is
you
this
know,
precedent
politics.
setting that Indonesia
Maybe
did
the
this?
same
Is
here.
there any other country that's
No, there's other countries that have done it.
Lots of them.
The US should.
So Musico is negotiating with Indonesia heavily since months. They'll be in here.
Indonesia is about currencies, right?
What's that?
Indonesia is about currencies, it's not specific to Bitcoin. It's like Bitcoin almost.
Yeah, it's all cryptocurrencies.
It's not even about Bitcoin.
Well, it's about all cryptocurrencies. It's about them keeping control of how transactions take
It
place.
seems to me like it's more about actual fiat currencies like dollar. But that's where the majority of currency of transactions are really taking place. So it seems like Bitcoin is just something that's been sort of swept along in that. So it's not actually attacking crypto specifically. They've just been kind of
Yeah.
brought along with everything else.
You mean, well, I think governments, when they realize the implications of cryptocurrencies, probably will not be in favor of them. I think we always expected Indonesia to maybe take this this decision. And to your point, we wanted to get adoption large enough so that, you know, if they were to cut it off, people would be really upset.
Yeah.
And there's going to be some people that are upset. I mean, I can't even buy my electricity with Bitcoin anymore. Or Pulsa.
Yeah, so the group
or
that's
Kismet.
upset is okay.
You can just
Yeah.
send me the Bitcoin. I'll get it.
Yeah, it's not exactly a groundswell yet, but we'll see. To this point, though, I don't know if you guys remember, we talked about this before I left, the 2016 Indian banknote demonetization, and this is the power of the government, and what government says can be problematic. For those of you who don't know this story, back on November 8th, Election Day, the day we got Donald Trump, kind of took the news of the day, right? But in India, meanwhile, they demonetized the 2 largest banknotes, and Modi got on television at 8 o'clock at night, unannounced press conference, or like spur of the moment press conference, and said all of your banknotes, the 2 largest denomination banknotes, as of midnight tonight, are no longer good.
Basically, you need to go to a bank and change them for new ones.
Right,
For
right,
the next 30
right.
days.
There are some details there, but in essence, they
you
said,
can lose your money, but the thing is that you need to prove where you got your money from, and nobody in India got formal ways of money because 90% of the market is just straight transactions. You know?
And the queues were 2
Right.
days to get into a bank, and you could only do a maximum of $300 or something.
well,
It was messy.
and what I find interesting about this, I mean, it's a crazy story, and it shows the power of government, but it also shows how hamstrung 1 billion people can be when, you know, some guy gets on television and says, you know, that ditch you dug and somebody paid you $100 to dig that ditch, well, that doesn't matter anymore. You know, that money is no longer any good. And, you know, it's just somebody on television. I mean, the 2 people who performed that transaction, the ditch still got dug, and the person was still paid. And it's the social agreement that I thought was really interesting, how they could just come in and change the way that everybody's cooperating and the way that people have been cooperating. You know, they're like, oh, you need your ditch dug? Well, I'll do it for $100. And like that allows people to come together and cooperate. And then the government comes along and says, well, you can't do that. And in this case, they were like, oh, okay, I guess it doesn't matter that I dug that ditch. I guess it doesn't matter that I, you know, taught that, you know, tutored that kid. It doesn't matter because somebody said so. And I just found it fascinating, and it's an example of what governments can do. I mean, the Indonesian government can shut down our project here in Ubud. The Indian government can come along and say it doesn't matter that you dug that ditch, and the U.S. government can come along and say Bitcoin is terrorist money and it's illegal as of now, and that would be problematic.
But what was the adoption of Bitcoin now in India?
Right.
Right.
I mean, it's
Well, I have another question. In India, so after this, and with the ditch example, like, it seems to me that an organic thing that may occur is like, so now exchanging $100 note for the ditch isn't valid, but are people starting to barter more, or like recognize the value of non-monetary, or like the old version of?
I'll
you know
bet.
what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, I'll bet they did barter in order to get through. I mean, people died because of this. I mean, it was very problematic, and I think they did do things to get by. But well, the follow-on to the story, maybe you guys don't know about this yet. Are you familiar with the Aadhaar?
Yeah.
So this is something that they're introducing in combination with the demonetization, is they're saying that everybody in India needs a digital identity.
Yes.
Called the Aadhaar. And they're introducing this with methods of payment. In fact, I think they're doing like a helicopter drop. They're giving people a bunch of money if they get this number and they get their Aadhaar number and their apps for phones, and there's all this stuff
How many people
queued
in
up.
India actually have access to the internet? What proportion?
Less than 100%. And
The adoption's over 1 billion now. Over 1 billion people have that card.
Yeah,
it's
it's one of
incredible.
the most successful.
Most successful, yeah. We know
Well,
Indonesia, I'm still waiting for my iktp.
you know,
I know.
I don't know how you guys feel about this kind of thing, but I mean, it's no bueno in my opinion. I mean, tracking a billion. Well, and it's an experiment, right? I mean, they're going to do this elsewhere, but if they can wrangle a billion people who half of which don't have a phone, and just herd them in a certain direction, and there's, I mean, in my opinion, it's a control mechanism. It's a way to control people. I mean, if someone is not cooperating or has a different political opinion, you just switch off their Aadhaar number and they're
Toast.
It's
Yeah.
like that movie with Will Smith,
That's what we're talking about.
Enemy of the State.
Yeah.
And this happened in World War II. When the Nazis rolled into Paris, they were like, "Where are all the Jews? Oh, you have very good records. Okay, well, we'll just send people to these addresses and take care of them." And in the United States, there was a lot of sensitivity around the Social Security number. That's not an identifier. It's not a personal identifier, and it has become a personal identifier. And people have forgotten why that's a bad idea.
Did you know Congress wants to replace it with a digital address?
No, I wasn't aware of that.
Put a billing to do it.
Yeah.
That's
Digital address.
Anyway, it seems to me that it's hard to picture stemming the tide of these trends, but I think all of this stuff is bad news.
Yeah.
I mean, this is all part and parcel with the question, can the government show up and tell, can a few hundred people in Washington, D.C. tell the world what they can and can't do, who they can transact with, what they can pay, how they can pay.
Yes, they can. It's called FATCA. Yes, they can.
They try.
All right. Well, that kind of brings us to the end of our time here, guys. I just want to make you aware that we have a Facebook group. It's a closed group, but if you know somebody in the group, we can get you in, anybody who's new. And stuff that's germane to what we talk about, we hope that you'll post it here so we can have a discussion online when we're not here together. All of our meetings are eventually put up on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel called the Filter Live is the name of the YouTube channel, and we get together every Tuesday night at Hubwood. Hubwood's nice enough to give us this air-conditioned space every week, so I hope you'll check out hubwood.org. Yeah.
Wait for Bitcoin to drop down.
And don't forget, guys, we're going to Kismet for where we this is the after hours party where we're going to tell you we're going to give you the real lowdown.
All the secrets.
All right, guys, thanks for coming tonight. We'll see you this time next week.
I was just at Kismet before I got here. Kids tore up the whole road all the way down to